Welcome to the Investor Fuel Real Estate Investing Show, where I interview the nation's top real estate entrepreneurs, industry leaders, and other amazing entrepreneurs to help educate and inspire you to take your business and your life to the next level. My goal is to add tremendous value to you during every single episode of this show. If you get value, I'd love it if you subscribe on your favorite podcast player, subscribe on YouTube, and my very favorite, please share this with your community so we can impact even more entrepreneurs. Let's start today's show. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I'm excited to have my buddy Pat Precourt with us today. We're going to be talking about failure and the fear of failure. And Pat is really an amazing kind of mind on breaking through all these kind of mental blocks you have and being able to perform at your highest level, especially for entrepreneurs. And we speak the same language a lot. We talk a lot about failure and the fact that failure is really a stepping stone to success. Like, I think if you're outside of entrepreneurship and you're very risk averse, like a lot of folks are afraid to fail. And for entrepreneurs, we're like, well, I have to try it and I'm gonna fail. And so let me get past the failures so I can get onto the good stuff, right? And that's what we're gonna be talking about today, how to fail forward. Pat, what's up, buddy?
What's up? Everything's up, Mike. Excited to be here. Actually honored to be here. Really am. I find it, I'm very, grateful to have an opportunity to sit here and talk with you and share some of these, some of these things people don't generally like to talk about because they're not always all that comfortable, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think, but there's great lessons here, and I think people are going to learn today. If you've been beat up a little bit, you just have to dust yourself off and get up. And so, anyway, great to see you. Obviously, I've got you on my podcast. Last week, you were at Investor Fuel with us, and we got to hang out a bit too. So, kind of back-to-back treat for me to hang out with you, buddy.
Awesome. Same here, and excited to rip into this.
Yeah. So I know we're going to talk a little bit about, I know there's a couple different types. Like all failure is not equal, right? So there's a couple types of failure. Like how do you describe that?
Yeah, and that's a great starting point because everybody I think has a little different relationship with the word failure, and a lot of that goes back to our childhood days and what we were taught by our parents and by our teachers. And generally speaking, we're brought up believing that all failure is bad, right? And the goal is not to fail. And if you do fail, you get punished. And therefore, we've kind of established like an adversity to the idea of failing. So let me share a little different viewpoint on that, Mike. And I break failure into two different buckets. We have failure by choice and we have failure by default. And the difference is this. When you fail by choice, it means you've actually attempted to go for it and you just simply didn't make your mark, right? And we use an example of skiing. You and I are both skiers, right? You're going down, you pick a really challenging bump run that's a little beyond your expertise and takes you three times. You get knocked off your skis by the time you get to the bottom. Most would consider either you're failing at skiing at that level, right? That's a failure by choice. You're pushing your limits to see how far you can go and learning in the process. Failure by default is, no, I'm just not going to go for it. Not even going to try it. So now bring this over to, say, New Year's resolutions and goals. And this is where it really kind of hits home. Failure by choice is you went for it, and it was just a little outside of your expertise or your scope at this moment in time, right? But that becomes one of the greatest learning opportunities. We're kind of learning our boundaries. Failure by default is, no, we just didn't go for it. We quit before we started. One's a growth opportunity, and one is an unacceptable type of failure. Right? You say you're going to do something, and a year later, no progress on it, and the cause is that you didn't try. That's the unacceptable failure. The acceptable failure is we did everything we could do, and it just didn't meet the mark. However, that doesn't mean we didn't grow from all of that we just did. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think. We could come up with a bunch of analogies here, but yeah, I think, and unfortunately, like, let's talk about kind of the general fear of failure that has been instilled in a lot of us, right? Is that it really prevents people from trying because they're afraid they're going to fail, right? I mean, there's some people that are like me, like you said, I've done a bunch of stuff and I failed at it, and for people that know me online or have been following me for any length of time, like it's sometimes easy to look at people like you and I and say, I even had a guy say this one time, somebody that I know pretty well. He's like, man, everything you touch turns to gold. And I was like, dude, you have no idea.
Oh,
You have no idea how many shit sandwiches I've eaten. Like, it's not true, right? And there's so many. I've had more failures than successes, but that doesn't prevent me from trying. Like, I'm constantly swinging for the fences. But there's a ton of people that just, like, they always, you talk to them, they've got an idea, like, hey, I've got an idea for something, but they just never even attempt to start it. It's just an idea that just lives in their mind, and they live with regret probably, and they live with that fear of failure. I better not try because I might fail, right?
Yeah, and it gets a little complicated in this space. So let's start with the idea that, like we were talking about, we have a belief system that says failure is bad, right? Failure is that if you fail, you're a failure. We worry about loss, we worry about judgment, we worry about the opinions of others, all associated with failure. And fundamentally, failure in our mind is just a bad thing. In school, if you failed, you got an F, and the F is big red letters circled like that, right? I got a lot of those. I can relate to those. Bad, right? So it stops us from doing the things that we want to do out of our concern about what everybody else is going to think of our failure, the judgment we're going to get. So let me ask you this, Mike. Out of any or all the failures that you've experienced, has anybody ever come back and judged you for them?
I mean, once in a while you get some critic, that's like, oh, you sucked at this. I was like, well, whatever. But yeah, I mean, there's critics out there, but
By and large, nobody
no.
really cares, right?
Yeah,
And
nobody cares.
yeah, and that's the truth of it. So so it's anchored in this belief that failure is bad, and it's founded in the idea that we have such a concern about what we think others think of us, which now means, we're being controlled by our imaginary expectations of what's going on in their head. It's a tough place to be because we can't grow anywhere. If you are unwilling to accept failure, you are incapable of growth. Because in growth, we have to do something new and different. New and different means we don't know how this is going to come out, which means there is always the risk of it not turning out the way we like or failing at it. To the degree that you're willing to embrace the possibility of failure will be directly relative to how fast we grow and expand. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think that's why the general population is generally unfulfilled, right? Because they weren't willing to take some of those risks or try those things or act on an idea they had. And you start to beat yourself up as like, internally you have this struggle of like, you want something, but you're not willing to take the risk for fear of failure.
Well, in comes the proverbial comfort zone. The comfort zone is kind of an oxymoron. It's not really comfortable. It's just certain. Meaning we could really not like our current existence, but because of the certainty that it provides for us, we'll protect it. In other words, no, we don't like how little money we have or how we've let our body get out of shape or our relationships or whatever it is, the work environment we have. We don't like it. However, it's certain. We know what's coming the next day. So therefore, we're unwilling to do something new and different. If we do new and different, we lose that uncertainty in outcome. So instead of that, we're going to stay protected in this comfort zone that's not really that comfortable. The only thing that's good about it is we know it's coming, even though what's coming is not what we want. It's kind of weird how our psychology works that way.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. So let's talk about some of the upsides of failure. I mean, some of them are kind of obvious, is that you eventually, if you fail enough, you succeed. Right? But let's talk about some of the upsides of failure.
Yeah, so there's we use the word failure in today's conversation, right? I use the word discovery oftentimes. It's an equal comparison. The fastest way forward is to constantly engage in the discovery process. The discovery process is doing that thing that you don't have all the answers to in order to reveal the answers that you're currently lacking. Like we always want to be fully prepared to do everything, right? We want to know all the answers up front. We want to keep studying and keep learning and more podcasts and more Zooms and everything like that, right? When in fact the most critical knowledge and insight that we need can only be gained through the actions of moving forward. So it's almost, I'll use a really weird analogy, a GPS analogy. Like, and I've done this plenty of times. You ever go out, Mike? You go out at night, you go to a restaurant you've never been to, you use your GPS, you're in a strange town to get there. You go, you're in the restaurant for a couple hours. Now it's time to go home. So you sit down in the car, you're in a parking lot, you have no idea left or right out of the parking lot. So you put in the address to go home, and you sit there and wait. And the GPS doesn't do anything. Like, but I need to know left or right, but it doesn't. The GPS gods don't even see you because you're not doing anything. And this is how magical this is, right? The moment you exit that parking lot, whether you go left or right, GPS gods go, I got you, and I'm now going to give you the exact information and get you home the fastest way possible, which is all you wanted in the first place, but that information was unavailable to you until you took the actions of moving forward. That's how failure works. Failure has got such a negative connotation. If we could just remove the word failure and replace it with discovery. Now, I'm not failing. I'm discovering everything I need to know that I didn't have a moment ago in order to get to that next level. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. It's I mean, if you think of, I'm not a scientist, but if you think of everything in science is testing something, right?
Yeah.
And the tests by design are set up that most will fail, kind of quote fail. Right. We tried this and it didn't work. We tried this and it didn't work. And here's the one thing that did work. I mean, if you think of like what it would take to create, I'm not a big fan of I know you're not either, of the pharmaceutical industry, let's say, but they're testing a whole lot of shit to find one thing that they can at least market towards working, right? And so they probably failed a million times to find one thing, but they don't call it a failure. They probably call it a sample or a test, right?
Yeah, test. Use another analogy for you. And this is something that every one of us can relate to, right? You learn to ride a bike at some age. I learned to ride a bike at some age, right? Our learning curve for riding a bike goes like this. We start at ground zero, and then it goes straight up like this, and then it plateaus out. But the length of time, Mike, over our entire life, okay? Let's say this graph was stretched out. That vertical line is all in the first hour of riding a bike. Your learning curve in the first hour is through the roof. And then it gets a little better, and just plateaus the rest of your life. And the most failures you will ever experience on that bike are also in that first hour. It is not by chance that they're exactly the same time frame there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I have a funny story about learning to ride a bike and a kind of aversion to risk, right? And so this is so for Lindsay and I know you know my wife well, and my son Jake. So when he was trying to ride his bike, and he was a little bit later, like he was probably like 5, we probably should have started him earlier, and we just we were busy, and we just every once in a while we would like, let's go over to the elementary school parking lot that's kind of wide open and learn. Our area is a little bit, we live in Dallas, so I wouldn't say it's hilly, but relatively speaking, there are some hills in our neighborhood. And we just kept, trying to like have him ride in the parking lot or in front of our house or whatever. And he just wasn't picking it up. And then at one point he quote failed, right? I remember he got going and then he just like flew off the back of his bike, landed on his back. His back was all scraped up. So then he's like scared to death to do it. And then my mom was in town. My parents were in town, and they're like, they raised 3 of us, and grandparents just have more wisdom than parents on parenting, right? And this is our only son, and so we only had one kind of quote test, right? And my mom's like, look, we need to just take him over here and push him down this hill, and because he needed momentum, and we were just trying to coach him on a flat surface, and he was scared to death, but they just took him over and they literally just kind of pushed him down a hill where he had the momentum, and he learned like so fast, right? And so there's something to be said that there's a lesson there for us too, and probably the show is the wisdom of others that have kind of failed before you or have tested it way more than you have, right?
Yeah, 100%. That's a great story, by the way. Yeah. Here's the other funny thing about the whole riding a bike thing, right? When your son hopped on a bike, when I hopped on a bike, when you hopped on a bike for the first time, were you qualified to ride a bike? No. No, you
Oh,
won't.
not when we started. No, no.
When you first hopped on the bike, the very first time,
No, right, right.
you didn't know anything about speed, momentum, gravity,
Balance.
balance, steering, brake. You knew nothing, right?
Right.
But you learn pretty damn quick, kind of out of survival, kind of out of excitement, kind of out of fear, but we figure it out really quick. No different than parenting. You know, when you first
Yeah.
had your son, when I had my first child, were we qualified to have kids? The answer is no.
No.
We were just committed that we're going to figure this out, right?
Yeah.
And every day, I'm sure you would agree, every day as a parent, there's a new lesson for us as parents if we're open to it, right? And there's things now on hindsight that we would do better than we did because we've learned from mistakes that we've made. And that's all part of it. But we never get this knowledge, this insight, this wisdom if we didn't do it first. And
Yeah.
if we're going to take away any one lesson from today, that's it. Information in and of itself really has very little value to us. Information applied converts it into a knowledge. So information that's put into action now turns it into wisdom through the actions that we do it. I share this once in a while with people who get stuck on we got to learn more space, right? I said, let me give you an example in our jiu-jitsu world, right? If I took one practitioner who has an entire year, Mike, to study the best in the world at jiu-jitsu, the videos, the trainings, the step-by-step, the whole 9 years, has an entire year to study it, right? That's this guy over here. Then there's this guy who shows up at the gym and shows up 3 nights a week for 2 weeks in a row. So he's only 2 weeks young, all right? But he's actually shown up now for 6 training sessions. If I put those two gentlemen, everything else equal, on the mats, the brand new white belt who's shown up for 2 weeks will destroy the year-long study practitioner every single time without exception. It'll be a 100% success ratio right there because the application of information gave them the knowledge, which is really what we utilize in this world. Not information. It's the knowledge that we get out of the application of the information that is usable. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
awesome.
just
Pat, when you think about, you know, if you were, we won't talk about ages here, but if we had never learned how to ride a bike at our age right now, we would look like fools, right? And, you know, another, I think that's interesting is I don't ride a bike very often. I mean, it's probably been a couple of years since I've ridden a bike, honestly, but I could jump on a bike and ride it just like as well as anybody. I mean, I'm not going to race it, but I could ride a bike just fine right now, right? And so if you think about the wall that people like allow to get in their way to not move forward on something for fear, it closes off so many potential opportunities, right, that are out there that and there's skills that you learn that you just become second nature. Like I could not ride a bike for 10 years now and I could get on a bike and ride it just fine. Like what else in your life did you allow fear to stop you from doing that's holding you back from a skill that you would think is second nature now, right?
yeah, yeah. And that's you know what that's a question that you probably will never know the full depth of the answer to, right? Because that could affect us in so many different ways. And as you know, we become more and more adverse the older we get to failure. As a child, we just didn't even think about it for all intents and purposes. As we get older, especially as we accumulate more, stuff in our lives, we get more protective of the stuff. And even though, when I say stuff, everything in our lives, from relationships to our financial well-being to our physical houses and cars, right? Yeah. We get more protective of that stuff, and therefore we get more risk adverse. And we get to a point where we find ourselves doing nothing new and different in an attempt to protect what we have. So we've closed off our ability and willingness to continue to grow forward. And grow forward meaning to experience failures to expedite our growth going forward. To your point, we kind of hit a ceiling now. We plateau out. And this is where you find individuals who now start to struggle with even waking up with purpose. You're like, well, one day, a long time ago, I was passionate, I was fired up, I was intentional, and now I don't even know why I get out of bed. And the disconnect has to do with they no longer are fighting for that bigger thing in their life. They've lost that connectivity to their drive or their purpose or their meaning, and they're now in this closed off environment where they're just protecting what they have. It's a challenging way to experience life, to say the least. And their unwillingness, and again, this increases with age, it doesn't decrease, unwillingness to experience failure because of our concern of what we think others think of us, it becomes crippling. And I know you know people who are in this state just like I do, right? And there's a level of stuck to it.
Yeah. Well, how do we help those people, Pat? Let's talk about, like, if you're listening to this and you're any age, right? If you feel like you have not achieved all you want to achieve, or have tried things that you've thought about for years or decades doing, and you're just, it's not the right time, you come up with lots of excuses. It could be like, well, the market's not right now, or I got to wait till summertime, or whatever it might be. You got to wait till New Year's next year. Like, we kind of, all the excuses. But the real excuse there is fear of not being successful, or fear of something, right? So how do we help those folks in the next 8 or 10 minutes here?
Yeah, it's actually, believe it or not, it's simpler than some might think, right? If we can appreciate, most humans can find happiness, daily happiness, outside of just normal stuff that affects it. We can find happiness if, one, we have a connection to something bigger than ourselves, and two, we know we're progressing from where we were the day before. Now, when we're in this state of protection mode and we're just, protecting what we have, there's no growth at all. So the quick way out of this is, all right, what is it that does drive me? What is it that I want? What am I willing to commit to that's important to me, and then commit to daily steps toward it. There's a process. You say, all right, let me create a year-long goal. How I want to be like at the end of the year in this one space, and then of course you can break that into quarterly goals and monthly goals and weekly goals, right? But it should come down to every day we have to see measurable progress towards a worthy outcome. If we can do that, we're good to go. Our soul is fulfilled. We don't have to be making massive amounts of growth each and every day. That's not what we need to be excited, right? But we need to see progress. And it's not about arriving either. And this is where I'm sure you've met many people who have arrived, meaning they met their goals, they're financially sound, they're there, and they're as unsatisfied today as they've ever been in their life because they've achieved the goal. Now they don't have that driving feature in their lives pushing them, inspiring them, fueling them, giving them that fight every day. They're like, I'm just here. And we've heard this all our lives, right? It's not about the destination, it's about the journey. That delta that we achieve every single day morning, moving towards that bigger outcome. So for anyone listening, I'd say that if you're, by your definition, in any way, shape, or form, if you're stuck, a couple things you got to do right now. Number one, it requires action. You can't sit still, not study, not practice, but action, something you can measure the result of. Two, get clear on something that matters to you that's bigger than you. It doesn't really matter what it is as long as it matters to you. And then three, measure your progress day over day. Every single day, be able to sit down at the end of this. You know what? I feel good today. I'm a step further than I was at this time yesterday. And you brought up an important word earlier in this conversation, momentum. Once we start this, do not stop. Momentum is one of those magnificent gifts from the universe that helps us through tough times. But when tough times show up and we have no momentum, we're down and out. We'll get our asses kicked in that moment. We need that extra energy to push through those extra hurdles. And the only way we get that is through the consistency of daily actions every single day. If they're starting out because they want to recover their body, Mike, they're 40 or 50 years old and they want their body they had in their 20s, which is very possible, right? that requires every day committing to steps in that direction and not giving up no matter what. And it's the smallest stuff that matters in this. We don't need giant, massive leaps and bounds. Just steady, consistent steps every single day towards that outcome.
That's awesome. Yeah. So stop being afraid of failure. And I think there's also, sometimes people are like, have unrealistic expectations about progress too, right? They're like, well, I've never done it. I've been afraid of it. But if I can't get to the end tomorrow, then I think some of it is, that's probably part of the fear of failure, is they just put unrealistic expectations in place, right?
It's a huge part of it, and you've heard, we overestimate what we can do in a year, underestimate what we can do in 10 years, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Well, let me share a little different viewpoint on this, right? And in the people we work with, I make this really clear. Once we have our goals, I don't want you to focus on your goals. I want you to focus on who you need to become to deserve those goals. Mainly your daily behaviors, the habits that you have to create to deserve those outcomes in your life. Every single human being, you and I and everyone we know, are nothing more than a reflection of our habits. So if we want something different in our lives, it simply means we got to identify the habits that are improper in producing the results we don't want, and the necessary ones to produce the results that we do want. But daily we should be measuring, did we execute the behaviors necessary to deserve these outcomes? Don't worry about the goal achievement. It will come if you're consistent in establishing the right habits to produce those results. So it's a little different focus. And I know that goes contrary to like our whole guru world, like, oh, focus on your goals. No. If your goal's at the top of the ladder above the clouds, you got to focus on your very next rung on the ladder. That's it. Don't worry about that yet. Yep. You will get there in time.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, Pat, I know your book is about to come out. At the time we're recording this, your book is about to come out. By the time this show launches, your book will be out. So tell us about the book and how can folks find it, and how can we support you, my friend? Yeah,
so the book will be out. I think this is going to come out, this recording will come out at the end of the month, and it's about when the book will launch. It's called Fail Forward, and it's a very functional, action-oriented book. Mike, it goes through, everything we talked about today, but a lot more. It goes a lot into the psychology of peak performance and understanding what it takes to get us as human beings to change behavior to produce the results that we desire in our lives. And it's very, very functional. It's like you take this book as almost as a blueprint as to how to operate each and every day. And I would love, what we'll do, Mike, I think we'll include a link with the call notes here maybe, where people can sign up. Depending on the timing, but it's either you'll be part of the pre-launch or you sign up and you can go right to a link for the book itself. And any support, any feedback that you give me on the book, any thumbs up would be amazing.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely have a link down below in the show notes for you guys that are, if you're listening or watching this, just check the show notes down below and we'll have a link for you to Fail Forward, Pat's book that's coming out. So, Pat, great to see you today, buddy.
Yeah, honored to be here. Love to share. And, pleasure being with you, brother.
I always love hanging out with you. So, everybody, hope you got some great value from today. I think the lesson here is stop waiting to try that thing. Like, go do it at the end of the day. I mean, you've heard this story many times. If you're laying on your deathbed, you're never going to sit there and say, I tried too many things. And, you're going to have regrets about the things you didn't do that you wish you had. And so I think the time to go do that is right now.
Mike, and I'll end it on this. You will never be critiqued for your failure by someone who's already achieved what you're trying to achieve. You'll only be critiqued by the ones that are way behind you, who would love to be in your shoes, and those are the ones you just can't care about at all.
Awesome. Good stuff. Everybody have a great day. We'll see you on the next show. Thanks for joining us for today's show. You can learn more about the amazing benefits of the Investor Fuel Mastermind community, including surrounding yourself with hundreds of other rock stars, 100% financing on your deals, and members-only discounts from vendors you're likely already using that, as a member of Investor Fuel, will save you more than the cost of your membership. Visit investorfuel.com to learn more. You can also check out the show's notes for access to free resources, how to get access to world-class lead generation, and even how to work with me directly one-on-one. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another episode. See you on the next show.